Iranian state media releases images it says shows fragments of a U.S. fighter jet showdown over Iran as hunt goes on for missing crew members. More than 20 people are injured after an alleged drunk driver plows into pedestrians at a parade in Louisiana. U.S. inflation is set to spike in the first report since the Iran war, driven by higher energy costs and fresh supply disruptions. The surge could derail recent progress on cooling prices and complicate the Federal Reserve's next moves on interest rates. Now, U.S. President Donald Trump has threatened that all hell would rain down on Iran if it did not make a deal in the next 48 hours. The threat drew a response from Iranian military. Iran's Revolutionary Guards warned that the region would turn into hell if U.S. and Israel escalate attacks. Listen to this.
Do not forget, if escalation continues, the entire region will turn into hell for you.
Now, it has been more than a month since the start of the war effectively closed off the Strait of Hormuz, a vital transport route through which about a fifth of the world's oil and gas usually pass. Global fuel prices have soared due to the energy export disruptions, and according to reports, 108 tankers have departed the Hormuz since 1st March, which is roughly 3 tankers a day. This includes the Iran-linked ones. However, reports cited recent U.S. intelligence assessment that warned that Iran is unlikely to open Hormuz anytime soon because its grip on the strait provides the only real leverage it has over the U.S. Now, there are 4 key reasons the U.S. has not moved to secure the Strait of Hormuz, militarily that is. First, it would divert critical military assets needed for broader war objectives. Second, securing the strait requires control of surrounding land, potentially involving risky ground operations along Iran's coastline. Third, protecting shipping would demand significant naval resources with multiple ships needed for each escort mission. And finally, the risk may outweigh the benefits, as U.S. warships and their crews remain vulnerable to Iranian drones, missiles, and uncrewed vessels unless those threats are first reduced. All right, to discuss more, we're now being joined by Giorgio Cafiero, who is a professor at Georgetown University and CEO Gulf State Analytics. Thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast. Let's begin with the big comment coming from Donald Trump, and who says that Iran has 48 hours to make a deal on opening the vital strait. Iran has, of course, retaliated, saying they are warning of hell across not just U.S. targets anymore, but across region. And of course, how do you assess this going forward? And what action do you think will be taken if at all these 48 hours pass without Iran actually getting to a deal? And do you think they would if there's any chance of off-ramp right now?
Yeah, thanks for having me back on your program to discuss these important developments. I think that Trump has sort of found himself in a trap, and he's quite desperate. He does not have many good options at this point. I think he realizes that, and his strategy seems to be not really one of trying to negotiate with Iran in any serious manner, but just sort of issuing maximalist demands and then threatening, unspeakable amounts of violence on Iran in the event that they don't comply with the demands. I think from Trump's perspective, this is his most realistic option for getting Iran to do what he would like the country to do, But I will say that if history is any guide, the Iranians tend to not cave into this sort of pressure, or as they see it, outright bullying from the United States. And I think that Iran has demonstrated that it really controls the escalation ladder. And therefore, while the United States might make good on these threats that Trump is issuing, I think it's pretty clear that Iran has demonstrated that it is not blinking in this conflict. The regime has proven very resilient and capable of continuing to not only move up the escalation ladder, but to actually be the party controlling it.
And would you say that it is still in control, and would it also, I mean, even in future, how long do you think Iran can actually keep up with this effort?
Well, it's a good question, but I would say ultimately time is on Iran's side. This is not to be dismissive of the extent to which the United States and Israel have inflicted massive amounts of death and destruction across Iran. But I think, the government in Iran has more support from its people in terms of resisting the American and Israeli war of aggression on the country than Donald Trump has from the American public. And also we see that support for this war in Israel is going down, evidenced by growing unrest with these protests in Israel against their country's war in Iran. There is an economic cost that the United States is paying, and your program was mentioning this a few minutes ago. So that is also a factor that is putting pressure on Trump to try to wind down this conflict sooner rather than later. I think that there's also something to say about a different mindset between the people of Iran and many other countries in the world. They tend to have a higher tolerance for the kind of suffering that goes along that comes out of a war like this. They have proven to be very, very resilient. Again, I don't say that to be dismissive of the extreme human suffering and the humanitarian catastrophes that this war has inflicted on Iran. But I think when it comes to this question about having the two countries both underwater, which one comes up to breathe first, I think that's going to be the United States, not Iran.
Also, Kuwait has just reported that two power and water desalination plants have been attacked by Iranian drones, resulting in significant material damage there. Now, desalination plants are the lifeline of Gulf states. And since Iran has now warned of regional escalation because it has warned of hell in the region, not just on U.S. targets anymore, is there any kind of retaliation that we can see from the Gulf states if their desalination plants are targeted?
Yeah, well, this is a really important question you're raising. A lot of the analysis that we've seen about how this war is impacting GCC states relates to the oil and gas sectors of these countries and what's going on with the Strait of Hormuz. But issues of water security are perhaps the most important, the highest stakes issues here for the GCC states. 5 out of 6 of the GCC states are absolutely dependent on these desalination plants. So real basic questions of human survival, human security in the GCC states are at stake when we consider Iran's potential to carry out more attacks on the desalination plants. To get to your question, how might the GCC states respond? Well, I think what they want is to see de-escalation as quickly as possible. There has been quite a bit of buzz, a lot of talk these past couple of weeks about the GCC states waging their own military operations against Iran. We can certainly get into it, but the bottom line is there would be very, very high risks that the GCC states would have to accept if they choose to go down that path. So I think rather than the GCC states choosing to wage their military operations against Iran, I think they will, in general, be pushing for de-escalation. Of course, we're talking about 6 different countries, not claiming that they're going to act in a uniform manner necessarily. Definitely the way the UAE is responding to Iran's behavior, very different from how, for example, the Sultanate of Oman is reacting. But as I said, I think when we look at the 6 GCC states, in general, there's a real desire to try to see de-escalation as quickly as possible. I think they all understand that a continuation of this war is not going to lead the GCC states to a good place. They don't have much appetite for a continuation of this conflict.
Also, let's come to another part about this American aircraft and the airman, I would say, missing. Donald Trump has said that Iran couldn't do a thing about an American aircraft operating over its territory, insisting air defense has been significantly weakened. His defense secretary, Pete Hegseth, has also said that the U.S. had achieved air superiority over Iran. And as well, one airman is missing in enemy lines, and Iran has been able to shoot the helicopters that were seen flying over Iran to rescue this airman. How do you assess this situation?
Yeah, so I think it is quite clear that the United States and Israel have achieved air superiority over Iran. However, it is necessary to understand that that is different from air supremacy. What this means is that the United States and Israel can carry out their operations against Iran, and the Iranians are not able to stop these operations from taking place. But that does not mean that the Iranians are not capable of creating big problems for the US and Israel and forcing the Americans and Israelis to accept some degree of risk when flying in Iran's airspace. What air supremacy is that's domination of the skies at a much higher level in which the skies are not really contested at all. In armed conflicts, that is much more rare. That doesn't occur as frequently as air superiority. We did see air supremacy when it came to the anti-ISIS coalition's fight against the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria a number of years ago. But that is sort of a rare example. Typically in conflicts, what we see is air superiority, and that's what exists in Iran's airspace. But again, that is relative, and that doesn't mean that the Iranians aren't able to use mobile surface-to-air missiles to create huge problems for the Americans and Israelis when operating in Iranian airspace.
Also, we began with talking about the Iranian regime. Now, U.S. President Donald Trump has said that Iran's new leadership is less radical and much more reasonable. Trump and the Pentagon have repeatedly claimed that regime change has happened. Do you agree with this?
Yeah, that's absolutely ridiculous. You know, what we always see from Donald Trump is he tries to frame things in a certain manner so that he seems like he is achieving these great objectives and is, as he sees it, winning. So it certainly makes sense that Trump would try to spin it that way and make one think that there has been regime change in Iran. There have been many leaders and high-ranking officials in Iran who have been killed since February 28th. So there's definitely many new figures at the helm, including the new supreme leader who took the helm early last month. But this is not to say that the regime has changed. I mean, the new supreme leader is the son of the previous supreme leader. As far as this comment goes about Iran being less radical, that is also ridiculous. I think what we're seeing now is a new phase in the Islamic Republic in which the leadership is going to be much more focused on resistance. It's going to be much less willing to make compromises, make concessions to the West. It's probably going to be much more aggressive toward its Arab neighbors. It's probably going to accelerate its geopolitical and geoeconomic movement toward greater alignment with Russia and China, it will be much less likely to engage the West, at least in the types of manners that we saw from Iran throughout the 2000s, the 2010s. So I really think that Trump is just completely off with that kind of, with those kinds of comments.
Also, I would like to come back to the Strait of Hormuz. Iran has been able to take control of it, and of course, we've seen this warning from Trump. He says that you need to open the Strait of Hormuz, but on the same time, we've had Trump saying that, of course, that's not the priority for them. At the same time, Iran has just recently allowed an Iraq ship to just pass through the Strait of Hormuz, and French vessel has been the first one from the Europeans. How do you assess how is Iran playing up the Strait of Hormuz, where they're also allowing these ships to go, but also saying they're in control, while Trump is flip-flopping on that he really needs it to open, but he also does think that the people whose ships are there are responsible for it?
Yeah, well, Trump is obviously all over the map when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz, like so many other issues related to this conflict. You know, his speech last week in which he talked about the strait sort of naturally opening. I mean, I don't think we even know how to respond to that. We don't even understand what he means by natural opening of the Strait of Hormuz. What we can say is that before this conflict, Iran was not controlling the Strait of Hormuz. Now it is. This is an outcome of a war of choice that the United States and Israel decided to recklessly wage in late February. Now that Iran is in control of the Strait of Hormuz, that is very significant leverage that Tehran has now that it did not have before February 28th. The countries around the world, including some of the ones you mentioned, understand that being able to safely transit the Strait of Hormuz requires having some sort of an arrangement with the Iranians. I think this is obviously one of the main reasons why Trump has failed to get European capitals on Washington's side in this conflict. As I said, Iran now has sort of this stranglehold over the global economy by controlling the Strait of Hormuz, and countries like France and many others, not only in the West, but really all over the world, understand that they're going to have to engage Iran vis-a-vis the Strait of Hormuz, and that there's not a military solution to opening it. And I'll just add, for all of these threats from the Trump administration about intensifying the military operations against Iran until they open the Strait of Hormuz to the United States and other countries that the Islamic Republic deems hostile. I mean, it's so easy for Iran to just fire drones at ships going through the Strait of Hormuz. That in and of itself will make it too risky to go through the Strait of Hormuz. There's no military solution to this.
Also, on the other hand, when it comes to Israel, they have still been on with their operation in Lebanon. But in recent, what we know is Yemen's Houthis have claimed strike on the Salat airport and other military sites. With the involvement of the Houthis, of course, we were waiting to see if they react to this, and we hadn't seen a reaction from Houthis. But now we are seeing retaliation from the Yemen's Houthis. How do you see there's an escalation there that would go on for even more?
Well, yeah, the stakes are very high when we talk about the decision on the part of Ansar Allah, or the Houthi rebel movement, to enter the war. I understand that the Houthis, in coordination with Lebanon's Hezbollah and Iran's IRGC, have been carrying out these attacks against Israel at a time in which Israel is fighting the war in Iran, and it also has all these other fronts: Lebanon, Gaza, the West Bank. It's safe to say that the Houthis are putting much more pressure on Israel. Now, I think a key question for us to consider is what's going to happen if Israel retaliates against the Houthis. Here we have to consider the possibility of the Houthis taking action to close the Bab al-Mandab. And when we have that strait closed, combined with the de facto closure of the Strait of Hormuz, that is going to significantly intensify the disruptions to the global economy, bringing the international stakes to a much higher level.
Of course, there's too many angles to this West Asia war, and thank you so much for joining us on broadcast and explaining every angle perfectly for us. I appreciate you coming on this show. Thank you so much.
Pleasure is mine. Thank you.
Well, a year after U.S. President Donald Trump launched a sweeping tariff campaign that rattled global markets, the effects on businesses, consumers, and trade are still unfolding. Now, let's take a look at this next report for more details on this. In April 2025, Trump declared what he called a reset in U.S. trade policy, imposing tariffs on imports from most major economies, including China, Canada, Mexico, and the EU, aiming to protect American jobs and reduce long-running trade deficits.
China, 67%. That's tariffs charged.
Originally, the effective U.S. tariff rate jumped from about 2.5% to nearly 27%, the highest in decades. A centerpiece was a so-called Liberation Day global tariff, meant to tax all imports. But in February 2026, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled parts of that policy illegal, forcing the administration to retool how tariffs are applied. On Main Street, the impact has been real. In one U.S. grocery survey tracking 55 staple items, 33 saw price increases, with oranges and tomatoes up more than 75% and apples up 30% since tariffs began. Although some costs have eased as exemptions were introduced, industries reliant on imported parts are feeling the squeeze. Agricultural equipment sales, like tractors and combines, have plunged as much as 30 to 40% compared with last year, as tariffs raised manufacturing costs and farmers tightened budgets. A major machinery maker estimates tariffs will cost the company $1.2 billion in 2026 alone. And just this week, Washington unveiled another tariff round, including a 100% levy on patented pharmaceutical imports that don't commit to lowering U.S. prices or building plants locally. Now, experts say these moves could reshape global supply chains and affect exporters in countries like India. Economists and business owners warn most of the tariff burden has been paid by U.S. companies and consumers, not foreign producers, pushing up costs rather than reducing trade imbalances. While tariff policy has been pitched as a way to boost domestic production and jobs, the price tag for consumers and industries remains significant, and legal uncertainty means trade officials are still rewriting the rules. This is Bureau Report. WION World is One. All right, with that, we call a wrap to World DNA for today. News and updates will follow on the other side. You're watching WION World is One. Stay tuned.
If God created the world, then AI is making its digital clone. Adventures in sci-fi, movies made by AI, a tow truck to clear space junk, robots running old age care homes. A mobile lab mapping climate change still needs a human in the driver's seat, but is it only a matter of time before AI takes the wheel? All these stories and more coming up on this episode of Tech It Out at these times.
In West Asia, every move shifts the world's balance. Wars, ceasefires, alliances, power never stands still. From Tehran to Tel Aviv, from Damascus to Doha, the West Asia Post cuts through the chaos to reveal the region that shapes the world. Because what happens in West Asia never stays in West Asia. This is the West Asia Post, the region's story, the world's impact.
On Wings this week, we cover how India leads Asia for spiritual travel interest and explore the country's historic Haveli homes from Delhi to Rajasthan. Also, World Heritage under threat as the war in West Asia rages on. Only on WION. World is One. Where darkness hides behind every corner. where the truth is stranger than fiction. A show that dives deep into the stories which shock and mystify. Unsolved murders. Psychopaths who defy explanation. International war crimes. And millions swindled in financial fraud. The victims, the accused, and the sinister plot. Prime Crime is your front row seat to darkness.
WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide, because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION, World is One.
Campaigns, elections, alliances, controversies, and power play. Beyond the noise and rhetoric, no election, no ballot issue too small. Stories that analyze global and domestic politics. More than just headlines. A dedicated show with varied perspectives, expert take, citizens' voices, detailed ground reports, and in-depth coverage from political corridors of the world. This is Race to Power. Only on WION. World is One.
As Dune Part 3 trailer impresses fans and excitement builds up for Harry Potter TV series, we take a look at all the novels that have inspired both shows and films. Check out the highest Hindi box office openers of all time and know all about the towns that have grabbed attention for their on-screen depiction. All this and much more with me, Diksha Bisla, on WION at these times.
In-depth coverage of global issues broken down into facts, figures, and simple words. Backed with analysis from field experts who truly matter, because we believe in decoding the real picture for you. So you get a much wider and deeper understanding of stories from around the world, a 360-degree analysis. An award-winning documentary series, week after week creating the maximum impact. Watch WION Wide Angle at these times on WION. World is One. Get the latest updates.
Destroy their
Breaking
missiles
news.
and raise their...
Credible, clear, continuous. Experts across aisles. Diverse voices, one platform. WION World is One. Get the latest updates.
Destroy their
Breaking
missiles
news.
and raise their...
Credible, clear, continuous. Experts across aisles. Diverse voices, one platform. WION World is One.